All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you again for all of you coming along tonight to our seminar for our LFS online series. Tonight, as hopefully you're all aware, we are doing a great talk about crossing Bass Strait, going to the Bass Strait Islands and also down to Tasmania. That photo you can see in the front screen is shot from the window of RNM, looking down towards Whitemark and over the Flinders Island. It's an absolutely beautiful part of the world, and one which I'd dearly love myself to spend a lot more time than I have going down there and dropping people off and coming straight back again. It is one of the most amazing parts of the world that you're ever likely to see. Tonight we're being presented to by Jono, who I'm sure most of you know, Jonathan Merridew. He's the ops manager and does most of, or an awful lot of, the charter flying for us at the Lilydale Flying School and also Yarra Valley Aviation. And I don't think he could remember how many times he's crossed Bass Strait and been down to Flinders and King Islands. He'd have to go looking through his logbook, and I don't think he'd be bothered, but pretty good experience. I think he's seen it in all of the conditions that you can possibly imagine, and also knows all of the best spots to go and the best places to see, and delights in sharing the experience, as we all do. It is an absolutely amazing part of the world to see and a great adventure. So tonight we'll be covering flying over water, some of the general rules and regulations about it, what you need to do, what you can do, some of the privileges that you have as private pilots that we as commercial pilots are a little bit more restricted with, some of the specific requirements for crossing over Bass Strait, how you do your route planning from down to Flinders and King Island and through Hummock and those sorts of places. And also Jono's going to give you a bit of a spiel towards the end about his experiences with some of the places down there and what makes them so fascinating and such wonderful places to go. A little bit of housekeeping. We are recording the session tonight, as we have with all of our LFS online seminars. I'll upload it this evening as soon as the session is finished, and within about half to 3/4 of an hour, the session will be available on our YouTube channel and also our Facebook page. So you'll be able to get in from there if there's anything you've missed. Please use the chat feature to ask questions if you can. We've got at the moment about 47 of you all joined into this session, which is fantastic, but it does mean if everyone starts talking using the microphones, it gets very hard for us to manage very quickly. So if you can type your questions into the chat screen, I'll pass them on to Jono when it's appropriate, but he can also see the chat questions too, so there might be no need for me to do anything. I can just sit here and enjoy the show. So that's about all I wanted to say. I'm going to hand over to Jono, who's going to take us through for the session. So Jono, all up to you.
Thanks, Carl, and thanks again for doing such a great job of sorting all these great Zoom sessions out. Welcome everyone, and thanks for logging in. And again, the idea of tonight's little chat is just to go through things for people to think about when they are planning and going to these islands and across Bass Strait. As Carl said, it's one of our most common charter destinations. It's also personally one of my favourite places to go. And when I say it, I mean all of Bass Strait and Tasmania. There's just lots of great things to see and do. And to me, a big part of why we like to fly and why we learn to fly and the thrill of flying is going to new places. To me, I particularly like islands, and it's very hard to get there any other way besides flying. So it's all part of the fun, I think, of perhaps flying and little adventures across Bass Strait, for example. So yeah, there's as this kicking off, what we're covering tonight is particularly Flinders, King, 3 Hummock, and then just touching on Tasmania. Again, we go to all these places dozens and dozens of times every year. We know for people who've just got their license the first time over water, it can be a bit of a big thing. And so, yeah, again, tonight's seminar is just to go through to us the essential things to think about and some things to be aware of, and just give some pointers on what to perhaps see and do. So to be clear, there's nothing inherently difficult about flying over water versus land. It just perhaps demands a little bit of careful consideration in your planning. And tonight, as we'll touch on quite a bit through, the main issue to be aware of is just going to be weather planning. That will be, it's for VFR pilots, the single biggest thing. Crossing Bass Strait is just, okay, the options are somewhat limited in terms of where your planning is. So if the weather changes, what are you going to do? And to just be clear on what some of those options are, plan Bs and plan Cs, which, as we all know as pilots, are very important to always have. So next slide, we've just kick off to go through the laws or the regulations governing flights over water, which we've dug up for you, is just these references in the CAR, CAOs and AIP. In a nutshell, the CAR says, that is Civil Aviation Regulation, says you can't go beyond glide range unless you've got life jackets on board for everyone. That's pretty logical. Same rule applies to an airline as a Piper Warrior. So that's that. We always stock plenty of life jackets at Lilydale. We do, if you're taking one of our planes away, we just ask that you let us know if you're going across water, and we'll lend you the life jackets for your trip. So the next slide goes into this just a little bit more. As a private pilot, there are no limits to how far over water you can go, provided you carry the life jackets for each soul on board and an ELT. However, there's always a but. You must carry a life raft if you're more than 30 minutes at cruise speed or 100 miles from land. So practically speaking, in a Warrior, that means 50 nautical miles. Warrior cruising 100 miles an hour. So therefore 30 minutes at cruise speeds, 50 nautical miles. So practically speaking, you can't go more than about 50 miles out over the water. Again, I'm just going to keep most of tonight's chatting and talking about Warriors and Archers, as that's what the plane that's probably most commonly flown, and just keeps it easy. So just covering off on the life rafts, we don't own them or keep them at Lilydale. They're very heavy, bulky items, and from our view, just unnecessary to carry unless you are going out to Lord Howe Island or New Zealand or East Timor or Papua New Guinea. You don't need to have them. The requirements aren't there, and they're very heavy, awkward things, very expensive, and we don't think they add a lot of value, and so they're not a requirement. But again, to reinforce again, you can't go more than 50 miles from land. And that is particularly has some relevance to going to King Island. We'll see that in a little while as we go through the slides, and you'll see a map of going to King Island. So next slide. Another thing which is recommended in the ERSA, and yeah, I think it's a good idea, particularly if you're going by yourself, if you're not as part of a group of planes, is a thing called SCEDS. It's in the ERSA. It's basically just a position report. That's all. So it's so whether you go to King Island or Flinders Island or straight across, the ERSA encourages you to make contact with Melbourne Centre and identify who you are, where you're going, how many people on board, and when you're going to call them again. So a scheduled reporting. That's what it is, a scheduled report. So so typically you would set them, say, if you go to Flinders Island, as you cross the coast at, say, Wilson's Prom, which is the usual way down there. And in just the next slide, we'll actually talk you through what you say. But there's just a few things to bear in mind, which is particularly, I think, important. There's no point in setting one every 15 minutes. 15 minutes, it'll take you at least 3 or 4 of them to get across, depending on the plane. It just increases your chances of forgetting to reply to centre and or embarrassing yourself. The point here is that Melbourne Centre will be on to you very quickly if you forget to call in and every 15 minutes. It's perhaps a bit embarrassing if Melbourne Centre are asking again and again for Romeo, Charlie, Romeo to reply, and it can get them concerned if you don't reply for whatever reason. And the other thing important to bear in mind is that you're not assured of getting Melbourne Centre below around 2,000 on the way to Flinders. That's the main bit there. We point out on the slide there that if you're going across and for whatever reason you're trying to call Melbourne Centre when it's time for your SCED, try the next frequency, have an idea where the frequency boundaries are on the way across. Your iPad or map will show you very clearly that sometimes you may not get centre where you're advertised to get centre, so just try the next frequency, and that normally works. Carl just mentions a small point here. The rules are you must carry a life jacket per person, as we must wear them. Caveat, except in the course of takeoff and landing. You certainly wouldn't break them out so for example, if you're coming into land at Apollo Bay or Torquay, you don't start getting your life jackets out and putting on your passengers as you're coming into land or taking off. The rules are quite clear about that. The other thing is it costs us between $50 and $100 to repack our life jackets. They come in nice little packets. So we'd rather people didn't start opening them up and putting them on, because we're just going to have to charge you to repack them. So as you can sort of see from both the SCEDs, the fact that you're crossing Bass Strait at 2,000 feet or below, it's just not going to be such a comfortable crossing, and that's partly what this chat is about tonight, to increase everyone's comfort with going across. So that's that one. The next slide just actually is a little excerpt from the ERSA. We perhaps will just quickly show that and then move on to a little example of a scheduled report. Carl, if you can cross the next couple of pages. As I mentioned before, the typical route to Flinders Island, which is perhaps the easier place to plan and go to, is, say, for example, you're flying. Carl, is that slides updating? Oh, poor reception.
Yeah, sorry, everyone. It looks like we may have lost a network connection at Jono's place. by the look of it. I'm assuming you can all hear me all right, but I think Jono's had a bit of a network dropout. So we might just pause for a moment or two and see if he can get his network back online. I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but it's not a problem anywhere else, and you don't need to cut out your videos because that won't make any difference. It's an issue with the connection at Jono's house, I suspect, so it shouldn't be too long until we can get back on. I assume you guys can all hear me okay. So my apologies. I'm sure Jono will be back online very shortly, so I'll just see if I can organise that. So if you guys could just bear with me for a moment, I'll just see if I can get it all going.
My bad. And if you can hear me, hello again.
Got you back again.
Sorry, Carl, have you got me?
Whoever's Netflixing, tell them to stop.
I'll tell them to. Sorry about that, everyone. Gotcha. Thanks, guys. Apologies on that. That would be my bad internet. I think we're covering up to Carl. Thanks, Michael. One of our Michael has just mentioned first time we flew to King Island, and with the ops normal time setting it at 3:0. It's important. Just every half an hour will do. And so that example I just mentioned of being at Wilson's Prom in RCR, heading to Flinders, Melbourne Centre, Arch, Romeo Charlie Romeo is a Beam Wilson's Prom, 5,500, tracking Flinders Island, 3 POB for people on board, and we'll report again at time in about 45 minutes. So if you're going over Wilson's Prom at 1:15, say time 4:05. If you're going past Wilson's Prom on the hour, then say time 3:0. And all Melbourne Centre will do is say, yep, Romeo, Charlie, Romeo, talk to you again at time 3:0. And so obviously, guys, the important thing is to remember to call them at time 28 or 29 or at time 3:0, but don't call them at time 3:1 or 3:2 because they'll probably be calling you, and everyone across Bass Strait will be hearing Melbourne Centre calling Romeo, Charlie, Romeo. Thanks, Dave. Just the great comments coming through here. There is some wearable life jackets for people who are perhaps planning on doing lots of trips across to Tasmania. There's Dave Long's just mentioned some good, excellent wearable ones, which you might want to buy, and they weren't that expensive from memory. Thanks, Dave. So that's the example of the sked. The next thing that would happen, so at time 28 or 3:0, call them again. Hi, Centre, Romeo, Charlie, Romeo, 5,500, ops normal, call you again at time on the hour, and so on like that until you cross the coast of the island that you're going to. So typically Flinders Island, as you hit the north coast, Centre, Romeo, Charlie, Romeo is crossing the coast, cancel skeds. And that's it. Exactly the same process in reverse for people coming up from that way. We might keep going on to the next one. We've talked about Flinders already, which is the next slide. So for a bunch of reasons which I go through here, we feel that Flinders Island is the ideal place to go to if you haven't been across Bass Strait and you're wanting to sort of spread your wings. Flinders is the best place to start. It's easier than the others for reasons we'll go into. It's straightforward, and you can build up to it nicely. Oh, good point. Sorry, just on the skeds, Sam. Melbourne Centre will, every time that you talk to them, you're addressing them about the skeds, they will respond. So if you say Melbourne Centre, Romeo, Charlie, Romeo, cancel skeds, if you don't hear them saying skeds cancelled, call them again or check your frequency or try the next frequency. Good point. So back to Flinders Island. So bunch of reasons why Flinders is easiest. Firstly, Flinders from Lilydale is about 190 nautical miles from Lilydale direct Flinders Island, but about 100 or so miles of that way, even more, is over land. That is to Wilson's Prom, down to the Latrobe Valley, that direction, so the territory, and the Prom's obviously very scenic and it's a fantastic landmark. Plus, also the whole way between Lilydale and the prom. There's airstrips that you're all probably very usable from. The prom onwards, there's little islands.
So, guys, I do apologise. Looks like we've got a bit more issues with Jono's network connection. What we're going to try is just turning off his video because it might be flooding his connection there. It might not be able to cope. It's his fantastic envy of us, probably. So, Jono, if you can turn your video off,
done.
We'll see if that solves the problem.
Thanks, Carl. Sorry about that, everyone. The slide's more interesting than my face anyway. So yeah, as I said, small little islands all the way to Flinders Island, Hogan and Deal. Deal actually has a recognised ALA airstrip on it, and Hogan is certainly landable. Both options are, I would suggest, an emergency type situation, but they're landable and quite doable if there was that sort of situation. Thirdly, going to Flinders, the weather tends to be better on the east side of Bass Strait, and you usually get more warning if there's crappy stuff coming from the west, because obviously the bad weather coming from the west will tend to hit King Island and Melbourne first, and so you'll be hearing it on the radio of poor weather coming across, which just gives you an early heads up. The strips on Flinders, I just highlight these three for ease of reference, just White Mark, Killiecrankie and Lady Baron. If the first time you're going there, I'd suggest go to White Mark just because it's easy and there's fuel and all the other things. Hire cars. Importantly, you need a hire car in Flinders. There's no other way of getting around unless you're a very enthusiastic bike rider. But yeah, cafes, distillery, we'll talk about that later. Killiecrankie at the north end is uneven gravel surface, challenging when windy and has got plenty of wildlife hazards. But it's certainly doable for anyone who's learnt at Lilydale. And Lady Baron at the south end is good gravel, long walk into town. Lady Baron grass, someone just mentioned before, is good. It's just a little short. They seem to be, I think that when I've been chatting with them, they've tended to be a bit sensitive about people who are used to, shall we say, big concrete runways. If you, again, have learnt at Lilydale and are comfortable with 800 metres of grass, you'll be fine at Lady Baron grass. And you're quite right. Gary's mentioned that it's a little closer to walk from there into town. So for all those reasons, we reckon Flinders is a better place to perhaps venture to for the first time. And the next screen again helps illustrate those points. Thanks, Carl. Yep, so there you can see it's a straight line from Lilydale right over those little islands. I don't know how large it is on your screen, but you can see the Hogan Island and Deal Island just nicely placed at 20-mile intervals. Worth perhaps mentioning there, the little red restricted area around East Sale. If you go on the straight line, you just clip that area. On weekends, it's not often active. Weekdays, it usually is, but just be a little careful. The heights there are between 4,000 and 6,000 from memory. So if you're below that height, it's not so much of an issue. One final reason why I think it's comfortable for people going to Flinders for the first time, when you're cruising at 4,000 or 5,000 or 6,000 feet, by the time you get to Wilson's Prom and you're looking south, if the weather's half decent, you can easily see the islands leading you to Flinders. And if it's a clear day, you'll even see Flinders from Wilson's Prom. So it just makes it more comfortable when you can see exactly where you're going from well before you get there. Any questions at this point on Flinders, guys? Not really. And yes, thanks, Carl. Flinders is a lovely place to go to. I'll talk about that a little bit at the end. All right, well, maybe the next slide. So King Island is slightly closer if you draw a straight line there. But from my perspective and from issues we've seen in the past, it's a little more challenging for VFR pilots, less features, less divert options. Firstly, that business of the 50 miles over water, if you draw a line from Apollo Bay to King Island Airport, it's about 49 miles. So more often you'll find people will tend to fly parallel with the coastline down towards Apollo Bay before heading straight out. You can play with your iPad and work out exactly where the 50 miles from land point is, but we would suggest most people go down there and are doing it like that, again, paralleling the coast. So therefore, once you pass Torquay, there's not many options. And even Apollo Bay can be a pretty interesting strip if you have to go there if the weather suddenly turns on you. There's no islands between Apollo Bay and King Island, and there's only one airstrip on King that's really available. So I've seen it plenty of times before. The weather will suddenly go purely at one end of King Island, which is the south end, by the way, and it's a bit awkward if you get all the way there and then have to turn around and head all the way back again. There's also no fuel at Apollo Bay or in King Island. There is at Torquay and Wynyard. You could say if there's an emergency at King Island, it's sometimes possible to get avgas, but it's best not to rely on it. It's probably $4 or $5 a litre, if you can get any. King Island can be busy with airliners and RPTs. There's not a great deal of parking area. It's also largely windy, and I've seen very strong winds there. And the weather, again, been down there where it's been a perfect day, light winds, and out of nowhere comes sea mist or fog, and very quickly becomes marginal IFR weather. 3 Hummock is we'll go back to, again, the fun things to see and do in King later. 3 Hummock is the next island on from King, heading to Tassie. It's not that much further from King, with a interesting strip, southeast, northeast, southwest strip. Not particularly long, somewhat uneven, interesting wildlife and other hazards. In strong winds, it also gets very interesting. Probably not recommended for your very first venture to an island, but by all means, done carefully. And again, people from Lilydale who are used to undulating runways will be in a good position to handle it. The 3 Hummock can have moss on the strip. They have scraped it off actually about a year ago, and there's now somewhat rough gravel on the strip at 3 Hummock. The parking area is still mossy. The gravel's quite narrow, and it's still undulating. That's a good idea from Scott. Thank you, of perhaps filming a flight down to one of these islands, Carl. There's a good little project for us over summer. I reckon we can make that interesting. So just highlighting that little planning map that Carl's brought up there of showing you Apollo Bay, King Island, and then 3 Hummock and onto Wynyard. So you can see, we would suggest that Flinders is, if you haven't been over water to islands before, Flinders is easier for the first time. But again, King certainly is doable, well within your reach. Just need to plan a little carefully. Right, what else? So that covers those bits. I guess the next part thanks, Carl. Once you've made it to Flinders or King, you're nearly there. Particularly from Flinders onto Tassie is a very short distance. From Flinders, it's straight line over another island, Cape Barren, where there's a well-established runway, no fuel there, and then on to the northeast to Tassie, on the north coast of Tassie, all with fuel. I've listed them there, and there's more airports again, which perhaps there's not definite fuel at. Highlight there, I should have mentioned, is Barnbougle, that high-profile golf course, nice big airstrip. Friendly people, great places, fantastic coastlines all around Tassie, particularly up and down that east coast. And then if you want to go right around the bottom and up to the west coast of Strawn. Interestingly, though, the point is there's not that many places on Tassie where you can get fuel. So just need to think a little bit about that before you head off. A good point here, and it's, you wouldn't really read about it anywhere, but you'll see this is borne out pretty well. I don't know if we've got any Tasmanians logging into us this evening. Tassie weather's very, very
Sorry, guys. Looks like we've lost Jono again, I'm afraid. Hopefully his network connection will come back up again. We need one of those old television test pattern displays to put up when it drops out. We'll just give him a minute or two, and hopefully his connection will unsnag itself. There's probably someone in his building watching far too much streaming video or some such, and it's all getting a bit congested. So hopefully he'll be back in a moment or two. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to send him a text message and see if we can get him that way. So just bear with me just for a moment or two while I see if we can get things back up and running.
And hello. Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. Don't know what happened there. Bad internet. But that slide says it all. So that's just generally speaking on Tassie. Can you hear me? Hello?
I can hear you.
Hello.
Yeah, hi, guys. Sorry about that. Hi, Gary and Dee.
Hello.
Nice photo. I like the background. Excellent.
Our background, Gary and Dee.
Yeah, it's great. What's it a photo of?
Taken from the plane flying. Where were we flying, Gary? One with all the cloud that was going up to
Blake's
Benalla.
entrance. No? Oh, Benalla.
The one with the cloud or the one with the water? I can't remember. The one with the cloud, we were. Oh, one with the water, just going up to Lakes, probably going back home.
Nice.
Too many.
Thanks for bearing with us, guys. Sorry, we've.
Oh yeah, that's the one going back to
Carl,
Lakes.
if you can hear us. Gotcha. Thanks, Gary. Carl, we're kind of going reasonably well. I guess we'd better keep it short for tonight, in case this thing drops again. So I've covered most of that slide. we're probably on to the final stretch of our favourites, and then hopefully take some questions from people. So, yep, this says it all. Our favourite places to go. We think Flinders particularly is just really underknown place to go. It's spectacular. It's beautiful. It has all the favourite things that you want on an island, and particularly nice things like a distillery, some good restaurants now, plenty of things to see and do, and it's a straightforward place as we've gone through to go there. Shall I say relatively straightforward. A bunch of different accommodation options on the island from B's. There's a couple of hotels. One Mountain Seas is particularly nice. Tavern, I think, has got some new accommodation as well, but particularly B&B's and various accommodation at the north end of the island. Probably main thing to watch on the island is the general store shuts at midday sharp on a Saturday, so there's not much groceries that can be gotten after midday. Also, there's only one place to fill up the car with petrol after midday on Saturday, and that's down at Lady Barron. So just need to be a little bit aware of that. Oh, and also phone reception is not the best. Definitely helps, as most of you aviators would know, having Telstra. Telstra's recommended if you're serious about flying and particularly visiting outback interesting places. Telstra works pretty well on Flinders. Optus, Vodafone, forget it. Just wouldn't work it. And thank you, Dave. Yeah, Palana Retreat on the north end. Killicranky and Palana at the north end are our favourite place to go. We go there frequently, and it's we think a really special place. King Islands, it's more high-profile island. It's more populated. It's smaller than Flinders. It doesn't have the stunning terrain and geography of Flinders, but it is nice, quaint, rustic little settlements. Great place again for hiring a car and go for a day or two. Roads are better on King. There's the dairy to see. There's some very nice beaches, nice restaurants, plenty of things to see and do over a day or two. And lastly, 3 Hummock we think is pretty special. It's not very well known, as those who've logged on tonight and have been there would, I'm sure, agree. It's spectacular. And it's pretty cool. I don't know anywhere on the island. There's just a caretaker couple there who are just there to make sure you're okay and enjoying yourself, and it's spectacular. The 3 Hummock accommodation, there's 2 houses, one a ski lodge thing with good accommodation up to about 6 to 10 people. There's also a separate smaller cottage, a little bit more basic. You do need to bring everything to 3 Hummock. There is no shops. There is no facilities down the road. You are on your own private island in Bass Strait, which is beautiful. The wildlife's practically tame. It's quite special. And good point, Gary, indeed. Thank you. Camping up the north of Flinders is good. There are some nice campsites there. It's a great idea. I do know someone who's actually landed on 3 Hummock and went just camped under the wing of the plane at the airstrip. They certainly weren't disturbed by anything more than a wallaby. They had it all to themselves. And you're right, Steve. The Telstra reception has improved on Flinders and Cape Barren. On King Island, it's pretty good. Can't remember if there's Optus there. 3 Hummock, there is bits of Telstra if you're in the right spot. So 3 Hummock is definitely limited. That's actually a good point to think about with flying to all these places, is how you're going to camp. Starwatch, if you land at 3 Hummock, for example, and you can't get reception, and it's about a half hour it's an hour and a half walk, or at least a half hour drive on 3 Hummock to where you stay. Bit embarrassing if you land having cancelled the Starwatch and then can't cancel your Starwatch because you can't get to a phone. At this point, the crank is pretty good now. So skip over anything too quickly. Very happy to take questions or comments from people. For all of you who know us at Lilydale, and I guess many of you do, that we really delight in seeing people who get their pilot's licenses, go out there and use it, have with it, and to us, going across Bass Strait and visiting these islands is just a terrific way of doing that. If the Bass Strait Islands were part of Victoria, it would be as popular as Portsea or Phillip Island. But the fact is, because they're part of Tasmania, most of Tasmanian tourism is geared up to getting Victorians or anyone else to go to the main part of Tassie. Flinders and King has largely been overlooked. I think that's changing. But yeah, I think it's changing. But for the time being, they're just fantastic places to go to. And particularly Flinders, not that well serviced by airliners. Carl's just made a good point. Yes, you may not be aware that you can cancel your SAR time on centre frequency. At Flinders Island at White Mark, it's around 1,000 to 1,500 foot in the circuit you'll get centre. And so, for example, there you can cancel SAR in the circuit. 3 Hummock, it's roughly 1,500 to 2,000 foot there. King Island, you can get centre on the ground. Good point, Carl. You can cancel with centre. Having said that, they would prefer VFR pilots did it by phone. But if you know that you're going somewhere where there may not be phone, by all means, you can do it through centre frequency. And lastly, a question which no one's asked, which I may as well just address, is that what about flying over water in a single engine plane? Well, basically, since I was 6 weeks old, I've been flying around this country and flown many times over the water in single engine planes. If it was as dangerous as perhaps some perceptions are, I probably wouldn't be here. But the easy fact is, simple as this: the plane doesn't know it's over water, and the chances of something happening are very, very, very remote. But it's by taking sensible precautions of an ELT and life jackets, and sticking to your having plan A's and B's and C's, it's something that I wouldn't think twice about doing. Good question from Justin. Fly RA aircraft across to Flinders? Yes, you can, following by all the same procedures of SCEDs, etc. Yes, there was something, I think, with RA that they were limited to no more than 25 or 40 RA people at Tassie across the north coast of Tassie and back up. It's the same. Yeah, there's flying Jabberoos and other RAs to Tassie and back up through King Bass Strait. Thanks for bearing with us, guys. I'm very happy to take more questions. And Carl's just saying he thinks RA can't go more than 25 miles from shore. I think, again, maybe you're right. That's again, as we explained, because you're actually the whole way around. You can stay from King Island to Apollo Bay, so it's at the top of King Island. So actually, it's land. So that, I think, will just keep you within that requirement. Thanks again for joining in, guys. Sorry for the lack of internet at our end, and definitely email us or call the office anytime if you'd like to ask questions about going around Bass Strait. Again, we're very supportive about people getting out using it. And as Carl started off, these islands are spectacular. It's one of the reasons we've got our pilot's licenses to get there and have adventures. And everyone, over to you, Carl.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for bearing with us with our minor technical glitches we've had this evening with Jono dropping in and out. I hope you managed to get most of the gist of what he was saying. The really beautiful thing about these trips across to Flinders Island and King Island, and I've flown there, flying a few charters over there, and have been enormously envious of the people we've dropped off and then come to pick up a few days later. They are just amazing parts of the world, unspoiled, and even just getting there in itself is a great adventure. It's, as Jono pointed out earlier, it's one of the things we learn to fly for, so that we can go to remote places where just other people aren't and haven't been ruined by excessive development and tourism. And Flinders Island in particular is magnificent. And I've just had a question too, whether or not RA Oz aircraft can go from Wilson's Prom to Flinders, and the answer is yes, you can. I'm not 100% sure that the 25 nautical mile rule exists for RA, but I think it does. What that basically means is that you can go 25 miles from shore, but there's islands along the way, and each one of them is only 20 miles. So you're island hopping to get down to Flinders Island. So you've got 20 miles along the way. Okay, so that should be just perfectly fine. The other thing about the 25 and the 50 mile rule is it's from shore. So if the place you're going to is less than 100 miles away, at all points on that flight, assuming you don't blow too far off track, you will never more than 50 miles from a shore. It might be behind you instead of in front of you, but that doesn't really matter. So you can cover those sorts of distances as long as you're within, for example, if it's an RA aircraft, 50 miles, and a GA aircraft, without wanting to carry life rafts, it would be 100 miles. So that makes it much more achievable. You can almost guess that the 25 miles was dreamt up by someone who was thinking, hey, I want to fly to King Island. I want to fly to King Island somehow from Melbourne. How am I going to do it? That number may have been chosen specifically for that reason. I don't know. But again, I do apologise for the minor technical glitches we had a few times throughout the evening. The session is recorded, so I will be uploading it onto YouTube in the next half hour, 45 minutes or so. So it'll be available for you to have a look at. So on YouTube and also Facebook. We're hoping next week to have another interesting seminar, maybe about what you can do once you've got your RPL, RPC and so forth. So we've got that one probably teed up for next week. It's a little bit fluid, but it'll be something like that. And again, thank you very much, all of you, for being a part of this. It makes it worthwhile for us to put them on. And thank you, Jono, for donating your Wednesday night again. He's the busiest man in the world. Actually tying him down is pretty difficult. Rob's just asked what the YouTube link details are. Well, if you go and search YouTube for Lilydale Flying School, I reckon you might find us. And the same with Facebook, so that's where the link will be. And I'll have that up there in about 45 minutes or so. Thank you very much, Jono, and thank you everyone for being a part of it. And we look forward to sharing the adventure of flying down to Flinders and King Islands with you guys just as soon as we can. Have a great night.
Thanks. Well done, everyone.